Welcome to the Maryland Bluebird Society's Bluebirds Forever Virtual Festival. So a little bit about Stan. Stan has been raising eastern bluebirds since he bought his 5-acre Bluebird Hill in Boyds, Maryland in 1974. He is a founding member and current board member of the North American Bluebird Society. In Boise in 2014, he received the prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award from NABS.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that generous introduction. I'd like to say good morning to everyone, and actually it's a good afternoon to most of us, but good morning to especially my brother Doug, who's now participating from Boise, Idaho. He's a mountain bluebird guy, but he's interested in our plants for eastern bluebirds as well. I'd like to acknowledge first of all, Beth, who's my technical assistant, and also Ed Escalante and Dave Gillum, who had put this talk together originally several years ago, and which the basis of the PowerPoint. The mission and purpose of the Maryland Bluebird Society is basically supporting the eastern bluebird, since it had a hard start the last 100 years because of the introduction of European starlings and house sparrows and the destruction of a lot of habitat. So we're trying to help the bluebirds recover for the Maryland Bluebird Society. And this is kind of the last talk in the Bluebird Forever Virtual Festival that we've been presenting this week. I think eventually, and I think Lisa will mention this later on, all these talks on the right-hand side, beautiful bluebirds too, my native bluebirds, will be available on the internet at some point. Native plants for bluebirds. Now, you have to understand that this is we live in the Piedmont. The area that I live in is kind of upper Montgomery County, Maryland. That's called this Piedmont area. Most of the plants that I'm going to discuss here are native plants that thrive in the Piedmont. If we were doing it for other parts of the country, there'd probably be a different talk. But a lot of these plants are actually common to the whole country, but this is specifically for the Piedmont. Now, we're going to clear up something. The difference between bluebirds and bluebirds. This is a bluebird, but it's a blue jay. That's not a bluebird. This is a bluebird, again, native in this area. It's an indigo bunting, not a bluebird. That's a bluebird. I just kind of messed up this thing. I put white on white, which is not a good color. Those are male and female eastern bluebirds. That's what we have in the east of the Mississippi River, or the east of the mountains, basically, the Rocky Mountains. There are three species of bluebirds. We're the top center, eastern bluebird. There's a western bluebird, looks a lot like eastern bluebird, but you see his chin's a lot bluer. And then there's the mountain bluebird, which is just a gorgeous blue all over. They're all the same genus. Why are native plants important? Well, bluebirds evolved with these native plants, and so what we're trying to do is to restore the plants that they have evolved with, especially in this area that I'll be talking about. Plants, especially native plants, will support bluebirds in surprising ways, not just fruits and berries. What wildlife needs, and this applies to other birds as well, but the bluebirds especially, need food, water, shelter, and a place to raise young. Now, the native trees can apply to food, shelter, and a place to raise young. We'll just talk briefly about water later on. But food, in the winter and spring, summer, and fall, they eat some fruits and berries. In the winter, they mostly eat just the berries. And in the summer, spring, summer, and fall, they mostly eat insects with a few fruit and berries. And we'll discuss them separately. This is just a list of some of the summer, fall, and winter bearing trees and shrubs. It's a lot to take in, but we hopefully we'll get this on our website before long. Now, I'll just go through a few of these, starting with what's available in spring through summer. This is a common serviceberry, downy serviceberry, and the book I will show you later on addresses, the size and the natives, like the downy serviceberry shed was the regular name, and then the scientific name, and the height and the size and the fruits, the light requirements, whether it's the kind of environment it needs, the region, within the states that it can thrive in, or whether it's good for birds or insects. So this serviceberry is good for a lot of birds, a lot of this in this area, and it's easy to plant. It's not a very big bush. It's everybody really should have one. High bush blueberry. This is our regular edible blueberries. Anyone who's grazed them know that birds love them. They also make a really good landscaping, native plants for landscaping. They're beautiful in the fall. They turn a beautiful orange. You can put them out in front of your house. It's really a nice plant to have. Common elderberry. I don't have much experience with it, but some people say that bluebirds just love elderberries. And again, this is a summer flowering and fruiting bush. Red chokeberry, again, it's supposed to be a pretty good summer and actually fall berry bush. You might recognize some of these, and some you might not. And that's what we're trying to show you, the variety. The Cornus Florida is our common dogwood, and this is getting towards the fall. The red berries that show up in the fall. I've had luck cutting these limbs with some berries on it and hanging them on my bird feeder, and the bluebirds will actually come and eat them. But they will clean these bushes off in September and October of the berries. There's a silky dogwood. Again, the berries are good, and not as common a dogwood as we see it as the Cornus Florida. And then the alternate leaf dogwood, pagoda dogwood. Again, good berries for fall birds. Viburnums, this one's called arrowwood, and downy viburnum. Again, they're good landscape plants, and they flower beautifully, and they're good fall food for berries, for the bluebirds. Here's another one. This is pokeberry. Most people consider it a weed, but that's another one that if you hang on your bird feeder, the bluebirds will come and get it, because they love pokeberries. Now we talk about winter. This is when the birds really need native plants to support them. What happens is that all the other the soft bed, the fruits are all gone, and some of the berries hang on. And we have spells like this one where we get ice and snow, and the birds really need a source of berries. Virginia, here's some of them I'll show on the next few slides. Virginia creeper, think about that as a bird vine. It's a vine. Some people consider it a weed. It looks pretty in the fall, but again, fall berries that persist. This is American Beauty Bush. Some of the titles I can't see because of an artifact. This American Beauty Berry. It's easy to grow. It's kind of it's a low bush, but they really are as pretty as that when in the fall when the leaves drop. And bluebirds love them. They're just a gorgeous plant for landscaping and for the birds. Ilex. These are different hollies. American holly. Again, this one persists through the winter. One of the latest foods for some reason the berries are not very sweet in the fall and winter. But you get to the dead winter, and apparently they get sweeter, and or maybe birds get hungrier, but they eat them in late winter and when they really need them. Another plant like that is the smooth sumac, which is supposed to be really good. Again, winter and late winter food for the birds or the bluebirds. The staghorn, which is the most familiar one that you'll see in this area. It's got the big baseball-sized seed head at the top of the pretty tall trees. Again, these sumacs are really pretty in the fall. These are in a really bright red very early. Greenbrier, again, some people consider it a weed. It's a vine that's pretty aggressive, but in the fall and winter, that becomes food for birds. And here's one that we'll all recognize and not appreciate. Poison ivy. Poison ivy is funny because if you've seen it on the ground a lot of times and low bushes and things, and you don't see these berries. Once a poison ivy climbs the tree, it changes characteristic. English ivy is the same way, but the poison ivy will climb up the side of a tree and then put out limbs, and the limbs look like part of the tree. I've seen them overhanging the towpath, the CNO towpath, and I think people pick them because they're real pretty like this in the fall, and not realizing what they are. But anyhow, they have these white berries that are just mature late in the winter and that are loved by various songbirds. I think that's yellow-rumped warbler on that one. Juniper virginianus is not really a juniper at all. It's an eastern red cedar. That's one that you see the little blueberries. Some of my trees still have the blueberries on them, so they persist. And this is one of their best late winter foods for bluebirds and a whole variety of birds. And this you can this is a holly family. The general holly family are great. So some of them are deciduous, and some of them carry the leaves through the winter. This is probably a winter berry. You've got to watch some of the holly varieties are dioecious, which means you can't just plant the plant and get the flowers and the berries. There's a male and female plant. Somewhere in the grouping, you got to have a male plant, otherwise you're not going to get the berries. But again, late maturing berries that the birds love. This is the book I was talking about, Native Plants for Wildlife Habitat and Conservation and Landscaping, Chesapeake Bay Watershed. I don't know if you can see that. That's what it looks like. And it's got these really nice, can't see that one. It's got a really nice, well, you can see it on the slide there. It's a description of all these plants and, their requirements and where they thrive and their value to wildlife. So that was fruits and berries, part of food. Now let's get to insects. From early spring to fall, they pretty much feed the babies insects. I think early on, I've read that the little tykes that just hatched, they feed them a lot of spiders, so some people appreciate. And then it goes to different kinds of insects and crickets, and a lot of caterpillars, the Lepidoptera. And this is the way a bluebird typically eats. He'll the blue bars left to right are the bottom one is perched to ground, which they mostly do. This is why they're so vulnerable to cats. They'll get on a low fence post or a low limb, and they'll look at the ground for insects, and they'll fly down the ground, pick up the insect, maybe kill it, and then fly back to their nest and feed it to the babies. There's a little bit of a walk and glean. I very seldom see them do that. Every once in a while, you see one hover if they spot something and they've lost it and they're trying to relocate it near the ground. And once in a while, they will actually fly from their perch and catch something like a flycatcher. So that's how they feed. But most of what they eat are the caterpillars. And the way plants come into this is the plants are these source environments for a lot of the caterpillars and bugs and insects that the bluebirds eat. This is the analysis that was done, the very complete analysis by Doug Ptolemy. He's taken all these native trees and the family and the genus and species, and just figured out how many woody plant, how many insect species the plants will support. And I guess you can see my arrow. Upper right is the oak tree, supports 534. This is our regular white oak, 534 species, and it goes on down till to hazelnut and beech. Again, 125 or so species. On the right, he talks about the introduced species or non-native species, not necessarily invasive, but things that builders and the commercial landscaping industry has been selling for years. The clematis and the different species of introduced species, and if you look at the big arrow, they support in North America that one specific one only supports one species in their home environment. They support hundreds, and on the case of the one in the middle, 400 species, and the clematis supports 400 species. The problem here is that because they only support one species of insect here, the landscapers and the builders love them. They don't chew the leaves. They don't cause disease. They plant them in huge rows and huge developments. Zelkova is a good example. I think that the fourth one down is Zelkova. Again, the landscapers love them, but they don't do anything for the butterflies or the bees, or especially for the birds. So you gotta watch that. That's why picking a native tree or shrub is much better than going for the foreign introduced species. This is the book I was referring to. I think you can see that. Bringing Nature Home by Doug Ptolemy. Does an exhaustive job of that. He's also got another book he's done recently. See, it's this one, Nature's Best Hope. It's even got a bluebird on the front, which is amazing for us. Again, he's talking about why native species are better for the whole environment, and you ought to make your yard into a small national park. There's also other aspects here to native species, the butterfly gardening, the Audubon Society for attracting the guide for attracting birds. You should consult them if you get a chance. So we discussed food. Now let's briefly we talk about water and then shelter, and then a place to raise young. Water, not much to say, but and native plants don't play much of a part here. Just provide some water for the bluebirds. I actually take there's this little fine tubing that you can buy at Walmart or at a fish store, which they use for aquariums, and I get about 30 feet of it, and I hook it into an outside spigot and move it. I dig a little narrow ditch to my to my bird bath, and it drips, and they got little controls over there to make it drip slowly or fast. The birds love that. Some of the birds will actually hang on the dripper and drip the fresh water dripping out, as opposed to the bath water the other birds have to drink. Anyhow, so provide water for your bluebirds. Now, shelter. Now here's where it gets. It's kind of surprising. Native plants provide a shelter in a lot of varied ways, and for a lot of varied species too. You've got canopy shelters, mid-story, understory, ground cover, and different species to use different niches. Now the bluebirds really like the open areas, the meadows. But in the winter, the bluebirds, and especially in this area in Maryland, they'll get together, and we've seen groups. Beth and I've seen groups of 30 or 40, and on the winter counts, they get together and they get into the canopy or mid-story, and they hang around where the berries are going to be available. So the native plants are supporting in many ways. So this is an example of some of the different habitats and niches. You'd find a bluebird in the edges of some of these fields. Your garden, again, surprising. A lot of the bugs, most of the bugs in the garden are beneficial, and some, in fact, eat other bugs, like the praying mantis. So you don't necessarily want to totally clean your whole yard and your whole garden every year, because the beneficial bugs have to overwinter, and if you compost or throw away all of this and that you're looking at, they won't have a chance to. You might want to leave a bit of a fallow area in your garden, or maybe a little stick pile where you put sticks in that you pick up in the yard, in the corner of your yard, and let the beneficial bugs overwinter. A good example is the praying mantis. They make a little golf ball size excuse me, nest, and it'll be attached to a long stem of some kind of a native plant or even a weed. If you throw that away or compost it, you won't get the praying mantis next year. If you somehow let them lay or put them in a stick pile somewhere in a fallow area, then you get your praying mantises next year, and they're real lions have been going after lots of other bad garden bugs. This is some of the other niches that birds like to use and year round. And then the last place that native trees contribute to bluebirds is a place to raise young. Now this is where the bluebirds evolved. When the bluebirds evolved, this was a typical. It's a dead tree. The woodpeckers would come and excavate for bugs, and then they excavate for their nest. And then the next year, the bluebird will come in and nest in that spot. Bluebird can't make its own hollow hole in the tree, but they use their secondary nesters. They have to nest where someone else, the woodpeckers especially, have shallowed out a hole. We don't, lately, or the last almost 100 years, these are called snags, and snags have been undesirable. They're considered dangerous and unattractive, but that's a real great place to support various wildlife. Now we do a lot of departments of natural resources are seeing the light, and in many parks they're allowing the snags, unless they're really dangerous, to exist, and they're not cutting them down, and they're leaving logs on the ground where it's really good wildlife habitat. If you can't find it, if you don't have snags, and we don't have fence posts where they can make the nests, this is where in the 70s, the Maryland Bluebird Society, Lawrence Zeleny, and the North American Bluebird Society, and Zeleny just designed a box, which is about 4 by 5 or 5 by 5, with a monitorable box with a hole that's exactly 1.5 inches wide and a roof. And the reason for the hole is that now that European starling can't get in there anymore, they would outfight the bluebird for every available hole that there was in the area. The house sparrow can get in there because it's small, it's just smaller than the bluebird. So the reason for the way to monitor it is you've got to get rid of the house sparrows, because they're a non-native invasive species, and they're not protected anyway. So we can just remove the nest and eggs to let the bluebirds nest. And the roof keeps it from getting wet. It needs some ventilation. This is actually the one that's on the North American Bluebird Society. I built this box last spring, I guess. And this is how we support the bluebirds as far as providing a place to nest. If the snags and the natural, the native plant sources are not there, and typically they're not. We need the bluebird boxes. So considerations. I won't read the whole thing, but you've got to be careful about, and use the books that I recommend. You need the cultivar that really provides the seeds, and that's don't just buy from by the species name. Do your research and buy the right plant to support the birds. And when you put it in your yard, consider how big it'll get, what kind of soil and light it needs. The fact that some are dioecious, and you got to buy male and female. Figure out when they produce fruit and when you need it in your yard, and actually you got to do some thinking and research before you put the native plants in your yard. They're all going to be useful. Some more useful than others. So the native plants, they provide food, insects, shelter, and nesting sites. The food is fruits in the summer and berries in the winter. They're necessary. Insects are certain trees, especially native trees, provide those caterpillars that they need for feeding the young. The recommendation, if you read the Doug Ptolemy books, to have as little grass yard as possible. You should go for a natural, overgrown look that has places where the insects and birds can overwinter and be natural. Don't buy a monoculture that I typically find at the Home Depot. Find the right variety that will suit your place. Remember, 85% of insects are beneficial. Always buy the scientific name, not the common name. That's a real come on for a lot of the box stores. Make sure you get the right name. You determine the characteristics that you need. Be patient for results, and keep your cats indoors because they're the way bluebirds feed are just cats are really hard on them. Thank you for attending. Again, we're part of the Maryland Bluebird Society. That's our website. We have a Facebook, Joy Photos. Hopefully we'll try to get some of this information on our website, if not on the Facebook. If you like what we're doing, consider joining or donating or volunteering. Become a member. So it's 100% volunteer organization. You get a Bluebird chatter that's written by the membership every quarter. Lets you know how our bluebirds are doing, and this is how you get to the website. That's the end. That's a picture of my front yard of one of our bluebirds. And questions?
Yes. Let's see. So thank you, Stan. There's some really beautiful photos in your presentation as well. And everyone, we will be sending you an email which will have the books and any links that Stan provided in this presentation. And now for your questions. Let's see. So we did have a question about Nandina berries, which another attendee did say that they could be harmful. They contain cyanide. What do you say about that, Stan?
It's taken the birds in this area quite a while to learn about Nandina berries. We have neighbors next door that planted a lot of them. They're really good gardeners, but they're still out there. The red berries are still out there near the road. The birds will not eat them. Early on, and I actually planted a couple because it looks so pretty. They would eat them, but I read multiple reports that cedar waxwings and other birds will have eaten them and basically died in mass. So you really don't want Nandina berries. If you have a Nandina bush, the berries are beautiful. Cut them off and use them for interior decoration for Christmas, but don't leave the berries out.
All right, another question. If I have left debris on the ground over the winter, when should it be cleared up in the spring? Excuse me, cleaned up in the spring.
Well, you've got to wait until the warm weather, mid-May, until the insects start coming out, the beneficial insects. And I guess the praying mantises don't come out until I guess the 1st of June or so. So I would just pile them, put them in a pile in the corner. They can't come out of. You don't have to leave them over the whole garden. Just have an area set aside for the insects.
Is there any way to preserve the berries for feeding later in the winter?
Yeah, so some of my friends, actually in the Maryland Bluebird Society. They certain berries like dogwood berries, you can pick them and freeze them and then serve them later on. I'd never heard of anybody doing that with holly berries because you don't really need to. But I've kind of tried it with pokeberries, and then they're just too soft. They don't work. But dogwood berries, it's a good thing to do because if you don't pick them and freeze them, the starlings and other birds will definitely clean them off the trees before October.
What kind of feeder is best to feed bluebirds? A platform or something else?
Well, I don't have good luck feeding bluebirds, but the people I know that do, they feed them shelled sunflower seeds, the hearts of sunflowers, and that would be on a flat platform. And they also have developed a couple of different formulas for suet. There's the bark butter and suet cakes that apparently they have. You'd have to look on the Facebook or website for them, the formula, but they have peanut butter and different things in there that apparently the bluebirds do like.
We do have a recipe that Kathy had shared. Kathy was our immediate
Right.
past president of MBS. And so we'll be sure to share that with all of you.
Yeah, that's the one. That's a good one.
Let's see. We have another question. I have a couple of chicks near my house. The box is not well ventilated and gets very little shade. As the weather gets hot, I'm afraid the chicks will overheat and not survive. I have a sparrow spooner over the box. Should I consider an umbrella as the weather gets into the 90s? I will improve the box ventilation as soon as these chicks pledge. So how should she address that issue?
Well, that's a tough one. Since the bluebird is pretty much dedicated to the box as soon as it gets lay eggs or chicks in it. So I would think if you put a moderate sized umbrella or something over the box, I don't think it would bother them that much, and it might help. But there are a lot of poor ventilation boxes. This time of year is not so bad. It's the next brood that comes up in midsummer. They have a lot of trouble with the heat.
And what about using pesticides and herbicides on your plants? How will that affect the birds, and what do you need to consider?
I don't really know if that's been studied completely, but it's probably if you use things like Sevin and the other pesticides, and it kills bugs, and the bluebirds are in there, they'll feed them. I don't know if they'll feed a dead bug to the babies, or if they're I think that definitely they're looking for live bugs. They look for motion, and they feed the babies recently living bugs. I don't know if it's a serious problem. I think you can use pesticides for your garden. I don't think it's that deleterious.
We'll say as master gardeners, I'm a master gardener along with Stan. One of the things that we do try to preach is to tolerate some damage by these insects to your plants, so that you can use less of the pesticides and herbicides. So,
and if you leave the native like the praying mantises and the what are the assassin bugs, which is some of the other native hunters, that also helps keep the bad population down.
Exactly. Dana mentions that let's see, the question in reference to the hot box, the box that's out in the sun. Dana suggests that you could use a heat shield as well. And we do have instructions on that, and we'll provide that in a follow-up email.
Okay. but definitely drill some holes the top of the sides and in the bottom of that box. If there's no ventilation, that probably doesn't drain very well either. It's probably a wet hot mess in there.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, I think anybody else have any other questions? I think that wraps it up for the questions.